What up, guys? It's your boy Matt from RamseyVoice.com, and you can learn how to sing through puberty. In fact, it's probably more important that you continue vocal training during this really strange time, but we'll get to that part later. Now, what we'll be talking about today is obviously the body changes during puberty, but also the voice changes during puberty. And this doesn't just affect boys or young men, it also affects girls or young women. So if you're a girl that's watching this, just understand that everything that we talk about still applies to you. It just may not be quite as dramatic of a change because a boy's voice is going to grow about 3 times. A boy's larynx is going to grow about 3 times larger than a girl's during the same time period. So today we're going to cover what actually creates these voice changes, these big changes in our voice, and what you can expect during puberty from your voice. And on top of that, my 3 favorite exercises to help singers go through this strange time in their singing. But first of all, let's just go with a broad definition. So puberty is the physical change in your body that results in sexual maturity, usually starts around 12 or 13 and ends between 15 and 18. And by the way, it can last longer or shorter. It can start earlier or later. It can last a really long time sometimes. And when we're talking about the voice specifically, both men and women's voices continue maturing throughout their lives. In general, our voices don't really settle until we're actually, in our late 20s and into our 30s. But certainly the most dramatic voice changes that you're going to experience, whether you're a guy or a girl, will be during this time. So during puberty, hormones like testosterone are going to increase the length of the cartilage that holds the larynx or the voice box, or we call it the thyroid cartilage, whatever you want to call it, Adam's apple. It's going to expand the length of that, and it's also going to expand the length and the thickness of the vocal cords themselves. Now, before puberty, the vocal cords could fit on about a penny, whether you're a boy or a girl. Now, for girls are going to go from vocal cords the length of a penny to about the length of a nickel. And men's voices are going to go from, again, the length of a penny to the length of a quarter. So quite a bit of difference there, typically from about 17 millimeters to 28 millimeters in length. And if you can imagine, the vocal cords are kind of like this hair tie or a rubber band, whatever you have handy. This is from when I had really long hair. But if you can imagine that this hair tie just doubled in width, that all of a sudden they went from being this thickness to twice as thick, would the sound be lower or higher? It would be lower because the bands, or your vocal cords in this case, would actually be vibrating more slowly. Now, in addition to the vocal cords, the larynx is also going to grow in length, the cartilage of the larynx, which means that the actual size of the vocal tract, or the distance from where the larynx is to the tip of your lips, is going to increase for most people, which means that your voice type or your vocal classification is also going to change. Typically before puberty, both boys and girls could be categorized as sopranos, or soprani if we're using the Italian plural. And typically after puberty, we're going to see the transition from soprano to, in the case of guys, a bass, a baritone, or a tenor. Or in the case of a female, from a soprano to eventually a soprano, or a mezzo-soprano, or an alto, which is the lowest female voice type. Now, this change in the size of the vocal cords, as well as the size of the vocal tract, also means that the location of the passaggio, or the bridge, or your vocal break will also change. Both for guys and girls, typically the vocal bridge is going to lower slightly. Typically for guys, we'll see the bridge go from being around like an A4, like it would for a female, down to maybe a D4, or an E flat 4, or an E4, the more typical place where guys are going to change. And I should also point out that these hormones are changing daily, resulting in rapid thickening and thinning of the vocal cords, which means that the voice is going to be very unpredictable and feel like it can break at any second. But trust me when I say this, guys, these squeaks and those pops in your voice are not going to last forever. This is just a phase that you're going through so that you can develop that rich vocal sound that you get on the other side of puberty. As a matter of fact, it's probably most important that you keep doing your vocal training and keep singing throughout this time. Why? Well, because as I mentioned, that position of where your bridge is going to change. And that means that oftentimes notes that you used to be able to hit, you might not be able to hit in the same way anymore. So it's really, really important that you keep discovering where your voice is and how it's performing in the different areas of your voice. I had a student once who was a young man, and he made it into several rounds of the TV show The Voice, and he sang the song The House of the Rising Sun. And when he went into the show, he hadn't actually, hit his vocal change yet. And so he could basically belt high notes all the way up to like around an A4, just like a soprano would be able to, just in his chest voice. Well, that was great until a few rounds into the show and his voice changed, and all of a sudden he just could not strain his voice hard enough in order to get to that A4 anymore. Instead, his voice started to change around an E or an F, and he was still in a position where he thought that he needed to keep pushing in order to get to that same note that he could. But unfortunately, at that point, it was impossible. That's not to say that he couldn't have learned other ways of doing that, specifically by singing with his mixed voice, but I could see how frustrating it was for him, and notes that he knew that he used to be able to sing. It was like two months ago, I used to be able to hit these notes like monstrously well, and now my voice breaks every single time I go to it. And it takes a long time and a lot of vocal training to learn how to do it in a more healthy way. In addition to what's going on with the larynx and the vocal cords themselves, I should also probably point out that there may be other developments physically that change the way that your voice sounds. For instance, like the size of your nose, the size of your mouth, your ears. These things might also change during puberty too, which also might change the way that you sound. I had a student actually that came to me before his voice changed, and he was such an expert at doing that 1.5 lip trill that I'm going to show you guys here in a second that... Well, after puberty, his nose actually grew quite a bit, and all of a sudden, that lip trill that never bothered him before itched his nose like crazy, and it was very difficult for him to do. Now, as we get into the vocal exercises that I want you to use during this strange time in your vocal development, I want to really encourage you to take it really, really easy and move really, really gradually with your vocal training. Easy does it here. You don't want to force anything on your voice when it's already in a position where it's changing quite a bit. So how do you get rid of those nasty vocal breaks? Well, my young friends, this is where one of my absolute favorite exercises, or group of exercises called semi-occlusives, come into play. Semi-inclusive, in case you're interested to know, just means that we're closing something somewhere in the vocal tract. Rather than singing something like an ah, where everything in your voice is completely open and all of the sound waves are leaving your voice. In the case of a semi-occlusive, we're actually closing something somewhere in the vocal tract to help us create some resistance, which helps your vocal cords close better. You could look at the example of a lip trill, like I just demonstrated. In the case of a lip trill, the lips are flopping, and that's where the sound is kind of hitting the lips and then traveling back to the vocal cords, which helps them stay closed. And the more that your vocal cords are staying closed, the more you're going to get rid of that break and be able to without any breaks or strain. So I'm gonna show you my 3 favorite exercises for singers to sing during puberty. We're just gonna get started off with the 1.5 lip trill. So the lip trill, as I demonstrated, we're just taking our 2 fingers, placing them in the middle of our cheeks and letting the lips flop together. Like this. You're not over pressing. You're also not blowing your breath so hard through your lips just to get it started. Like, instead, we just want to get the lips to kind of flop on top of each other. And that little kind of floppiness is what's going to help propel them to sing the scale. So we're going to do that same thing on the 1.5 arpeggio. I like to think of it in 3/4 time, like a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, done. And you can stop this video and rewind it as many times as you want until you get it. But I'm just gonna demonstrate in a few keys for the young men out there, and then we'll do a few for the young ladies out there. Guys, let's get started right here in the key of B flat. So, By the way, I have to play piano, so I can't actually use my fingers on my cheeks like you guys should, but I definitely encourage you to. Let's do one more. All right, for the young ladies now, we're gonna start right here in the key of G. Same thing, it's that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, done. That same thing, singing an octave higher than I just did, so it's gonna be on here. Again, just letting those lips really flop, and here we go. Now here. Let's do one more. Great job. Now for our second exercise, we're going to be doing something very similar, the same octave and a half arpeggio that I just showed you. But this time, rather than letting the semi-occlusive be in the lips, this time we're actually going to lower our soft palate and sing into the nose, creating a very nasal consonant. Well, why, God, why would I want you to sing nasal? You probably already feel like you sing nasal enough. Well, in this case, again, that little bit of kind of closure in the vocal tract is going to help the vocal cords stay closing. So in this case, we're just going to say the word rung, like I rung the doorbell. And once you say that rung, I want you to hold the NG like rung. Once you've got that really nasal sound, then let's just put that on the octave and a half. Now, be very, very careful that you're keeping it in your nose the whole time. We don't want it out your mouth like, we want like this. And so let's do the whole octave and a half together. 2, 3, go. Hear how it's nasal? One more for the guys. Now, for the young ladies or the guys whose voices have not totally changed yet, let's do that here in the key of G. Now here. One more. Great job, everyone. And for our final exercise to sing better during puberty, I recommend a singing straw or singing through a straw. I'm going to use the one that was provided to me by Whitney Nicole from singingstraw.com. And what I really like about this is they're sized perfectly, and you can add a couple of them and sing through 2 of them or 3 of them at the same time, or one of them, between 1 and 3, depending on how much resistance, and you can kind of feel it out as you go. So what you do is you basically just wrap your lips around the straw and you an vowel, like a. Now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna go on that octave and a half scale, and we're just going to sing through the straw. And you can do this through, a soda straw or something like that. You just wanna stay away from straws that are too small, like a Starbucks straw. That's probably a little too small, or maybe like a big gulp straw that's maybe too wide. You want it to be kind of like right in the middle. So it's gonna sound like this. Next one. One more for guys. Now let's do a couple for ladies. This feels so silly, but it's so helpful, I promise you. One more. Great job, everyone. Just remember that no matter where you are in your singing journey, especially if you're singing during adolescence or puberty, it is so important that you continue your vocal training. As I mentioned, it's very, very common that the voice shifts in position. Things that you used to be able to sing, you may not be able to sing anymore in the same way. You may have to sing some of those notes with mixed voice rather than just with chest voice. And that's why it's so important that you find an expert to help guide you there. Guys, thank you so much for watching. And again, if you've been wandering through YouTube land, just a little lost and confused little lamb trying to learn to sing better, I've got a fantastic solution for you. Check out Master Your Voice, the only singing program with personal feedback plus a proven system of exercises.